Good evening. As you know, Donnie's he decided to leave town for a few days, and so um, I was going to be willing anyway to try to step up and discuss the subject of eldership and the work and of eldership, and so. We'll go ahead and get started with the work and authority of eldership. I'm not used to the technology of this one. Again, we're talking about the work and authority of elders tonight. But as we have talked about the class before, in the eldership room where we all met, we talked about the purpose of this class. Is in our opinion that we really want to try to start working with all the men and to develop leadership skills and understand the importance of leadership, especially leadership in the church. Leadership that you see in a corporate America versus leadership that you see in the church aren't necessarily the same thing. Your purpose is driven in a sense of caring and making sure souls are getting to heaven. And so, this class is to encourage, especially the men, to think about these things, talk about the scenarios that we're going through, and come up with your thoughts about how to work through situations. You always remember that when you have eldership, you're not alone. In our situation, there's 4 of us, and we have the opportunity to brainstorm and talk about situations and come up with the best solution. So, again, we're trying to develop leaders for the future. Let the wives of the men kind of know the situations in which, if you are an elder's wife, that you're going to see. Also, if you're not in that situation, understand some of the true scenarios that do happen in elders' face constantly throughout the whole different congregations. So somebody is usually facing those situations. Donnie has mentioned this every class, and I encourage you really to take this really sincerely, really think about those men who really need to be encouraged to develop the leadership skills to become an elder. Of course, some are young and they just need a little bit of time and a little bit of encouragement, and we want you to be thinking about those things because, again, we're going to try to talk to them after this study. And then maybe there's some older men who are close to being qualified, but maybe you think that there's something that they're a little bit of missing, something that they need to hone in on a skill and to help them to develop into an eldership. Again, we really want to encourage you to look into, to be really sincerely look into what can help the men at this local work becoming an elder. Okay, tonight, as we mentioned, we're going to talk about the work and the authority of the eldership. And so, we'll talk about the organization of the church. When we talk about the work of the church, we first talk about the church universal. What would we say what is the church universal? How do we define it?
All Christians in the whole world.
Okay. Right. When you look at Matthew 16:18, and then also you go to Ephesians 4:4, and it says, and also I say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. The church is the collective saved. It's those that once you become a Christian and you have met the things that God has required of you to do that, and you become a Christian, God adds you to the church. That's church universal in that sense, and that's what it's referring to. Ephesians 4 4 talks about there being one body, which you know the body is made up of, is the church, which is made up of the individuals. And so the Lord adds and takes you away. When you become unfaithful, you're not part of his church. But when you look into a local work, we can't read, the elders can't read your minds. And so as far as what you're doing, our job is to edify and build up and encourage. But the church universal is made up of those who are Christians and those who are faithful. Again, when we look at the church universal, there is no organization. There is no pope, as you see the Catholic Church and the other people try to establish all these churches together. There is no work assigned to the church universal. There's nothing in the scriptures that point out that is something that we have the authority to or the right to do. And so inside of that also includes there is no treasury. There is no funds that we need to send to a group to justify a work, because there is none. Again, there is no biblical example of that. Then we look at the term church. We look at it in a local sense. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 2, you'll see that he says, to the church of God which is at Corinth. You see that Paul writes to a church, a local congregation. You see that being established. Also in Romans 16:16, it says, greet one another with a holy kiss. The churches of Christ greet you. So in that last part of that sentence, you see that there's a plurality of local churches. And so, though we're all part of the church universal, if we're faithful members, we have a responsibility to identify with a local work, and hope and praying that when you do that, you're able to fall into a situation where you're under eldership that are qualified men and have a good, strong congregation. But that is the desire. And so under that, you understand that it's been planned to have elders and deacons to be appointed. If you look at Philippians 1:1 and also Acts 14:23, Philippians 1:1 says, Paul and Timothy, a bondservant of Jesus Christ. He writes to all the saints in Christ Jesus who are in Philippi with bishops and deacons. You see that that is spoken of in those terms. Also Acts 14:23. So when they appointed elders in every church and prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they have believed. And so we see inside of the local congregation, God has desired a organization, an order of having elders to be overseers, to be, and that's what we're going to talk about, is have the responsibility of carrying and overseeing the work of the local church. Again, if you look at the distinctions there between the universal and the local, in Ephesians 4:4, again, we see that there's just mentioned as being only one body, and there is no organization, no work or treasury. But in the local sense, we see scriptures that point out that is a different situation, that there is organization inside of a local work. You do see that there are many different local congregations, and those congregations are supposed to be elders. Also, you see there is a work to be done. Ephesians 4:16 is a verse that you can turn to, and if you read it, it says, from whom the whole body, joined and neatly kneaded together, by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. So we have the responsibility of edifying ourselves and building up each member here with the right attitude of caring and concern. And also, in 1 Corinthians 16, we see where the church was to collect funds, and so we see that there is a need for a treasury at a local work. And so that is what we see as the difference between the universal and the local church. We see now that when we look at the local church, the desire is that every church to have its own elders, and that's what Acts 14:23, which we read earlier, was saying, that is something that God wants structure. I don't know how many of you have ever been in a situation where you were in business meetings. When we first started attending here, we didn't have elders until, I think, 96. And, I'm so thankful for those who are willing to step up in 96 to give us a footprint of having eldership here. And the work has grown ever since we have done that. So God wants us to have our own elders. He also asks and demands that there is a plurality of elders. There's not just one person in charge. It's a collective group of men who are qualified to be the elders, but it's not on the scriptures there. It must be a plurality. Also, inside of that, you see the work of eldership is he is to have oversight of the flock, and that is those that are among him. Again, this is the 4 elders here have responsibility for this congregation, the members in it only. I'm thankful that I don't have to have concerns about other congregations. That would be a major responsibility, and there's just no way you could do the work of an elder because you can't know your flock. You can't feed your flock. You can't tend your flock. It's not, your part of your eldership is knowing your flock and what they need to be fed. And different people need different congregations need different things at different times. And that's why it's the responsibility of the eldership to know their flock and understand what needs to be done. And so that's why we must have an oversight of that. Any thoughts so far concerning what I've said? Any questions or any comments? It is a huge responsibility. Again, when we talked about men that I want you to look at is understand how important and how weighty it is. I think you could talk to the ones here, and they can tell you there's been nights that we didn't sleep, especially when you think of COVID and the things that related to that. And then isolated instances that occur on occasions that really can give you some sleepless nights. The next slide here, we're looking at some of the abuses of the local church organizations. One is elders who will not lead. Why would somebody take a position of being an eldership and not willing to lead? You have to question yourself if you're wanting to do that and you're not willing to be out in the forefront. Understand that people are looking at you, and that's your responsibility to do that. This isn't a job of prestige. Hey, I'm an elder, and I get to wear this name tag, and well, the church go whatever, but I made an elder. But it's responsibility of, if you want to become an elder, understand that you need to lead. You need to be out in the forefront and be thinking about what you are doing. Elders who have to be led. Does that mean that elders can't get feedback? The thing about being lead is you want to be in that part, and having to be led is being told what to do. That doesn't mean that elders shouldn't have an open ear to suggestions. That doesn't mean we're giving up our our leadership when we expose ourselves to criticisms or to thoughts. But it should not be in a situation where, we come in and we ask, like the meeting with the men, hey, what do you want to do next? Where do y'all want to go? And then you tell us where you want to go, and then, this is what we're going to do. That's not scriptural. That's not what God wants from you. Also, elders who are yes men to one. This can be very dangerous in an eldership. Usually, sometimes you'll have an alpha male, as they say. He's more outgoing. He's very strong, and he comes across as like he knows it. And so instead of maybe defending what you know to be right, you yield and say yes to whatever he wants. That can't happen. I tell any man right now, if you're not willing to say no to anybody, you don't need to be an elder. You have to be able to be part of a team of understanding, but you can't be a yes man to one of the other elders, or one just to all the members just to do whatever they want to be done. You need to be able to say no, or we don't need to go that way.
It really goes against God's wisdom to have a plurality. I mean, if you just had two elders and one was a yes man, I guess essentially you don't have a plurality. So it really, they need to be willing to give input and
Does disagreement mean controversy? No. We get into our meetings and you'll have different conversations, and we're all over the place, but finally we come. But we support each other. George?
On that subject there, the yes men, they like a problem, but they would solve the problem. And they want to, still be, good if it wasn't there really even put out on the person. And they'd sit down, somehow, whatever they need. The yes man will never be a leader because he doesn't take the charge of situations.
Yep. Anybody else? As you can kind of tell, that's a passionate point of mine. Is I think as all four of us as elders, we have a responsibility to go into that room and represent what God wants us to do and our different ideas, and work out a solution. And that's what needs to happen. And so we got to be willing to do that, Mitchell.
Larry, I know a lot of times, not time and all of this. When we go in that room, shut the door, we don't all look at this one thing, the exact thing. And you've got a yes man, that's easy.
That's right.
It takes a lot of guts to say, no, I don't. And you gotta work through that. We've had that.
Oh yeah.
But do we come out mad at each other?
No.
Work it out. And you look at different directions. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I remember one thing was that, St. John's told me this back when you ordained for the foot forward. And he come and talked to me. He said, one thing you gotta understand. He said, when you accept this, it can go through. You've got to learn to live in these things. And never forget.
Yeah.
You have to do that later. You got to set that.
Right, and that's exactly right. But when we talk about the scenarios at the end of the class, if you'll listen to the different men and women who speak it, every one of you have different ideas of how you would approach it. And see, that's what the beauty of an eldership is that all four of us in our situation may come up with a different angle. And what that's doing is that's brainstorming. And then by that brainstorming, you're able to come up with a strong, hopefully a stronger outcome and an answer to a problem. And so don't ever, if you're in, like in these classes, I want to encourage, especially those of your men, to speak out and give your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts as potential future elders. Okay, but don't be afraid of your thoughts, because you may have a really good idea. You may have a different scenario than I have, and so that's part of not being, a yes man won't ever really give his thoughts. And so in an eldership, you're really wanting to do that.
The ownership comes from the idea, or at least mimics the idea of Christ being our good shepherd. And the elders are supposed to be able to look at the example of Christ in their eldership. So when it says you can't have elders who won't lead or look at Christ, he led even to the point of death, or the ones that have to be led. Well, God and Christ listened to others. Abraham talked to
Right.
God and asked for all these things as far as Sodom and Gomorrah goes. But in the end, God made the decision. Or the ones who are yes men, well, there's no way we can solve that.
No. Very good. Okay. Elders who abuse their power or push. Again, it's a concept of understanding that your job as a shepherd is to overlook for the best interest of the whole. It's not about you. It's not about as we'll talk about in a little bit. The power of the elder is not in himself; it's in the eldership. It's in the and so to think that don't allow yourself to come up and say, okay, I'm an elder now, therefore I can get whatever I want done. That's not scriptural. That's not right. The power is in the eldership, the collective whole. And so there's some who want to go into it in a situation where they're power hungry. You have situations where members who will not follow. A lot of times that's why you see congregations that may have men who qualify to be elders, but they won't establish eldership because they don't want to submit. And I've seen situations where we've had, I've had preachers have come here, and I know that they happen not to have eldership where they're at, and they're, a lot of times, unfortunately, the preacher gets to put in a situation where they make him be the role. He's used to controlling things, and so I've seen times where I know at least one time where I had to step in and say, no, this is the way it's going to have to be done. And so, but that's what happens in a lot of places where members don't follow. Again, I want to brag on you as a congregation, as a collective whole. There's never been an issue here that I'm aware of. I don't mean that you agreed. I know you didn't agree with everything. But the congregation here, we're very, very fortunate to have you as members of this local body, because that does not ever seem to be an issue. Unqualified elders, there are 3 points there. I have been in situations where I've seen congregations so desperate for eldership that they'll just put anybody up. Maybe I know somebody that, because he was really good at keeping maintenance in the building, and he was always on top of that, and he's like a really good man. He was older, and he ended up being an elder. And there was never no true leadership there for him, and for the sake of having an elder, that didn't do him any good. That didn't do the church good either. And so, just because somebody's a good man or the best we have is not satisfactory. Elders who do not watch for souls. If you don't see a congregation or get up and talk about, talk about different issues, like Donnie will talk about modesty, or he'll talk about the dance, or talk about social drinking, or any of the world problems. We talked about the problem with the institutional division of the church. Why is that done? That's watching out for your souls. That's being aware of what may be addressed. So that is that is what you're wanting from an eldership. But if you're not willing to take on that responsibility and look, then you're not, you need to be careful. Some think that deacons are junior elders. Again, understanding that this congregation understands the difference between elders and deacon responsibility. Hopefully, a man who serves as a deacon can work and become an elder, but he himself is not an elder of any form. Another thing is expecting perfection. As was mentioned about, we live in glass houses. None of us are perfect. I hope we're striving to be godly and do what's right. So be careful that you're not expecting a man to be perfect. He needs to be doing the best he possibly can. And some courses just neglect to try to have an eldership, and so a lot of times that has to do with not wanting to give up power. Any thoughts on that section? I took a little bit more time probably than I needed to.
Well, the elders, you're watching, so you have a note here that we keep a attendance sheet, and we keep a close watch on them. And when they get to a certain point, we report it out to them and try to make a correction. We are watching out for those.
Yeah, yeah, we try to, that is right. That is what we try to do. When you look at the terms that are referred to, I'm going to kind of not to. This isn't important, but when you look at the scriptures, there are 3 different words that are referring to eldership, and it refers to different aspects or responsibilities of eldership. The one is the Presbyterian. This refers to eldership or elderhood. It refers to one older, classified as a bearded man. Idea that suggests maturity and judgment, experience, and wisdom. I think that we have a lot of good, young, strong young men here. As you get older, you'll become wiser. That doesn't mean you're not smart now. There are things that I was involved with when I was 25, 26, 27. I thought I was wise, and I hit 45, 50, now 60. I realized I wasn't so wise. It wasn't that what I did was wrong, but it just wasn't the right way of going about doing things. And so there's just something about an eldership, elders being a little bit older, a little bit more mature. This word is translated as elder in Acts 14:23. And also 1 Timothy 5, and then also another form of the word is presbyter. And so, again, this refers to one who is elder, mature. The next one is episcopus. This refers to being overseer, or superintendent. One charged with duty of seeing the things that are done by others. Thayer has another way of saying it. The epi part is talking about over, or to look at, or I also have saying another word, to watch, or to watch over. So that word means actually he's an overseer. He is to watch over the congregation and make sure things are being done and held done appropriately. Again, in Acts 20:28, that word is translated as being an overseer. And also in 1 Timothy 3:1, it's referred as being a bishop. The third word that's used to mean something a little different is poimen. This means one who keeps guard. One who keeps guards the sheep. Means to feed the flock, work of shepherd, feed, guard, and guide and protect. So it's when it's being, excuse me, I thought I'd clicked that over. When it's being translated in two different forms, we see this word being used as shepherd or feed in Acts 20:28. And then when we talk about pastor, pastor is referring to those who are in eldership. In Ephesians 4:11, that's actually translated as the same thing as a shepherd. So when you consolidate all these terms, elder and presbyter means maturity. Overseer and bishop refers to the responsibility of administrative role of overseeing and making sure things are right. And then the last one is shepherd or pastor means it's more of a teaching role that you're making sure that things are done. For time's sake, I'm just going to go with this Acts 20. If you will, you'll see in Acts 20 in verse 17 and also in verse 28, you'll see where this is all referring to the same. This is all the different words used in one scripture referring to the same person. So in Acts 20, it says, from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called for the elders of the church. And so that was referring to the older men. And he tells them later on, therefore take heed to yourself and to all the flock among the Holy Spirit, who has made you overseers, and to shepherd the flock of God, to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. So when you read those scriptures in Acts chapter 20 from verse 17 to 28, it's referring to the same man and the different responsibilities that he carries. So when we go back to the presbyter, the episcopus, and the poimen, that refers to the same man. And these are the responsibilities that man has that we call an elder. So if you are an elder, these are the areas of responsibilities in which God has given you. 1 Peter 5 is also another place where you can go and see all three terms used to refer to the same people. I'm around out of time. The work of the elders. I'm going to try to speed through this because I really want to get to at least one of the scenarios. Nani said about two. I'm not doing very well either. The work of the elders, again, it's designed to lead. It's suggested in the term of being elder. Elder among the Jews, they were those that were the leaders of that, and that had to do because of their age. And just through time, you develop leadership roles. They were given the responsibility of making decisions involved, like in setting goals and plannings. Like you think of study of Nehemiah, how he planned about building the wall. He devised a plan and had the families do that. And that's part of being a leader and involved. Involved in guiding the church in its direction. Must have wisdom to see where things lead. It involves making decisions that are not always easy. They're tough decisions, and being able to defend them. The second point there, is responsibility is to oversee. He's supposed to be a steward of the fold of God. Then he also has the authority to lead, and has more of an idea of responsibility in terms of that to oversee and make sure that things are done correctly. Next point is being an example to the flock. He must be faithful himself, and he and his family must be examples as well. And here's one of the situations where I think a good example, and I'm not trying to embarrass George, but I want to say that this is, when he became an elder back in 96 as eldership, one of the things that I always think about is how important it was to, has been taught to attend services like you're supposed to. That no matter what situation, God comes first. Ball, family, whatever. You don't miss services. That's always been, since 96, he's an eldership, which represents him, always been something he has taught and stood for. Then, a few months back, the tragedy hit his family and the loss of his granddaughter. All those things he preached about not missing services for no matter what, to put God first. That's what eldership does. He was here. He didn't skip out. He led this congregation. So when you and I have difficulties facing the tragedy even of death, his example led me into saying I need to be at worship. This needs to be God. He gave me a spiritual direction, not only by what he has asked for me to, by saying this is what needs to be preached, what needs to be taught, but by his example. And that's a way in which elderships need to lead, is be out in the front, be an example of a strong man of leadership, one who practices what he preaches and what he teaches and what he demands. And so that's something, that to me, that just resonated with me, the importance of what that being an example to the flock is that we talk about that often, about not forsaking the assembly, and that's something that he practiced what he stood for, and it's something we can follow. The responsibility of feeding the flock, idea of teaching. We should be able to see that it's done and do it ourselves if we need to. Be watchful what is being taught. So sometimes if you get asked by the eldership what's going on in the classes, or that is why. Again, make sure the whole counsel is being taught. That includes also responsible for what is in the pulpit or in the classroom teaching. Again, his job is to defend the elders. I'm going to stop there. I think pretty much I made the other points of that. Again, the only other point I may have made, because I want to get to the scenario, is that the authority of the eldership is in the eldership as a whole, not as one. But also, it is only, to the local work, and it is not one where we have authority of other congregations. Okay, I want to go to the scenario of lesson 7. I don't know if I don't know if I can. Shane, I don't know if you can you scan me to that scenario, and I'll go ahead and read that. A problem. You are one of the elders. 2 women in the congregations are at odds over a conversation they had about the behavior of their children. Each woman points out faults in the other's children. Now each woman is beginning to get sympathizers. How would you handle this? Thoughts? Yeah. So my first question is, as an elder, does this have to be dealt with? Yeah. This has been affirmed, so it's not he said or anything. This has been affirmed. And so you look at the situation, this is going to have to be handled. This is not something we can just sit back on and wait. Your job as a leader is to look in the future. What happens if you don't address this situation? It gets worse and multiplies. And ultimately, what happens inside the church? You split. And I was talking to Donnie, and this is a scenario, I don't know necessarily if it's about this, that split the church. Something had happened that seemed to be very simple between two mothers grew, where you started to split sides. And because it wasn't handled, it became bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually split the church. So, you're an elder. Now you see the future. So what you've got to do, you've got to look at where this plays out at. This is going to split the church. So I've got to do something. Now what do you do?
Take these two and sit in a room and discuss what the problem is and try to work out a resolution.
Yep. You got two women. That's very good. Now you're an elder or an elders. However, in the situation, can you not do? I know this sweet little girl, and I don't necessarily know this one really good, and get be biased. So as an elder, I don't care how much you love somebody, you can't be biased. I don't know how many times I've talked. You got to take the emotions out of a situation, and you got to look at the person and the person's, and you got to sit down and you got to talk to both sides. You know, if you go and just talk to one, they seem right. Proverbs 18. You know, you got to sit down and you've got to sit there and you got to talk and you got to do that. So you got to identify what else.
Both of them, I see what they see with their eyes being right. So they, in each one of the ladies' eyes, that they're right. So each two individuals looks at any situation differently. So there's going to be some differences, no matter what you do and how you handle it.
Okay.
It's being able to get them to come to an agreement
Yeah.
is the hard thing.
Do they necessarily have to agree on the discipline issue? Not necessarily. There may be different styles. Okay? But you mentioned it, but something else has happened. They become bitterness, they become gossip, and they start bringing other people in and to gain favoritism. So so there's sin. So, you know, you're right on target right there. You know, but the issue is that sometimes we have differences of opinion, and there's wiggle room inside of that. But when you start gossiping and you start bringing people into your business, and you start being angry and holding ill will, you're splitting the church. And as an elder, you got to go in there and see if you can see if you can make them come together. But the next thing is you got saying, hey, you both have been gossiping, right? You need to get this sin corrected. Anything else needs to happen?
Where do you go back to the first, that each woman pointed out faults in others' children. Unfortunately, that's human nature, that we can always point out faults in someone else. That each woman, sit them down one at a time, and say, here's what we observe. You do the other one the same way. Then you bring them together. Here's what we got to do.
Yeah.
Let's come to some kind of agreement and stop it.
Yeah. And that's the very thing you're trying to do. You're trying to make them come to resolution of just respecting each other's differences, and then you're also addressing the sin. And it may also be, and this is the thing that, for time's sake, has happened, is that this happened for you and I. This happened a while back. I think George and Donnie faced this a while back. was there was something of that nature happen, and they eventually had to tell the people in play, especially this is one, I don't want to hear anything else about it. Inside of these walls, you don't need to be bickering. You don't need to be dividing the church. And at time as elders, we're not going to stand for you dividing the congregations, because you can't get along, you can't act like you're supposed to. And it had to come down on them pretty hard, because they're protecting the souls of the congregation and trying to combat a potential of a split. And so, that becomes the major. And anything else, I'm gone over time.
And I would think it needs to be considered is, even if these two women are reconciled, depending on how pervasive their discussions have been with other people, people are prone to attach their own issues to something else that's happening. And so this might be something that needs to be dealt with in the public sense of, we've now got a rift that's mutated into something completely different. And it might call for someone getting in front of it.
That's exactly right. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Right. Okay. Very. You good? Right. Gary, you can go ahead. Okay. Anybody else? Thank y'all so much. Sorry about being a little slow on the speed.